I know you had some life changes like, within the last few years. And you've had, as you and I have spoken before, you've had some time, as have I, to just to kind of reevaluate kind of who you are and what you want in life. And it's been really cool for me to watch that journey for you, even on something like Instagram, because I've seen how, to me, it just feels like you have really come into like your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel to me, I mean, you've always struck me as somebody that's really authentic, but in the last like 6 months especially, I feel like there's this new sort of grounded energy to you, and a kind of a curious exploration, and it just feels like things have really opened up in new and interesting ways. But
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of times that whole journey starts by difficult things happening.
Yeah.
And I know that for you, at least, I don't know how many years ago now, but part of that was kind of navigating like associateships
Mm-hmm.
and understanding and trying to figure out what felt right to you. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe if we could start off by talking about, what associateships or what your associateship was like, and then I'm sure we can bridge into more of like
Yeah.
the personal
Sure.
journey.
Um, so I think, I mean, everyone that, when you finish your program with whatever it is, whether it's dental or you do a residency program and then you go into an associateship, I mean, obviously everybody thinks they know a certain amount of, things about the practice or themselves at that time, right? You could be in like maybe your late 20s, your early 30s, just depending on where you are. And you kind of come out and you think you know certain things, but you really don't. You just kind of like you're curious too, and you go into a job. And in my situation, I went into an existing perio practice as an associate, and I didn't really know what to expect, I guess. And I quickly learned in that process that I was supposed to kind of be like a certain way or fit in like a mold of a certain the doctor that was there, which was a male. And just didn't know kind of where I fit in or who I was at the time or what kind of capability I had in my own decision making and figuring out where do I stand as my own periodontist, on my own. So it was just like a weird transition time, and I didn't know much, and I was kind of scared and almost like just timid, and I still felt part of me was there, but not fully to who I am today, as far as like the ability I have now to make decisions or listen to my intuition and things like that, because you just don't know. And when somebody older than you that you look up to and you're like, wow, like they're an amazing doctor, look at what they built, they have this amazing practice, and you don't really think like you're capable of doing that. It's just like a new experience. So I kind of went through that in a sense that I felt like in this associateship, I was supposed to be in this mold, and I was supposed to treat patients and be the periodontist just like this person was, that I didn't really have an authentic self to me or how I wanted to practice. So I don't know. I think that we've talked about this together, that we both felt this kind of way. We didn't know who we were at the time. And I think that the biggest shift happened to me was when that ended, and it ended, which I was very shocked that it ended, and we just were not aligning on so many different things. But that was a huge like challenge for me. And I was kind of just like lost, I feel like, after that, because I'm like, this is what I was supposed to be. Like, if I walk into this job, this is supposed to be it. And I was supposed to be there for however long or become a partner or whatever you think in your mind somebody's told you, or like people have said that they've done. You just feel like you have to do it in the same manner. So after that, I was just so down. I mean, I didn't really know what to do. And that's kind of where my journey started, of being more like introspective and like seeing what is it that I want to do? Where do I stand? How can I get strong again to lead my own way and my own journey. And I think that that period of time where I had about like 6 months to a year where I really wasn't working much. I had maybe a couple different jobs, but it was just a tough time for me, and I was going through a lot. So kind of leading into what you were asking me, with, how did that associateship play a part in that? That was how it played a role. And then leaving that and having to kind of figure out things out for yourself, basically.
Yeah. So I want to pause on a couple things that you
Yeah.
mentioned. One, which is just such a great point, and it's not ever talked about, I feel like, which is that, you go into this practice and you, first of all, have no idea what to expect. And none of us are told anything about this,
Yeah.
like about what to expect. And I think that dentistry as a whole has been changing so much over the last several years, with like corporate dentistry, and there's just a lot changing within the industry. So
Yeah.
the only way you're really even going to figure out or have information is just by talking to your friends that have also done associateships.
Hmm.
And it's an interesting thing where whether you are, you went to dental school or you went to dental school and then you specialized, no matter which of those routes that you choose, the road is so hard. Like, it's grueling. I mean, you are kind of picked apart. I talked about this to I interviewed Paul Goodman last week, and we talked about this a lot, just about how, in dental school, it's like you're just in survival mode, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I was certainly in survival mode in my residency. I mean, for a
Yeah.
lot of it, especially at the
Yeah.
beginning, you're just bombarded with so much. And then you get into your associateship, and you, a lot of times, I think for me, I've had several associateships. I think that I've been in like 6 offices or so, at least,
Yeah.
over the last 10 years. And um, some will, one of the best people that I ever worked for was a dentist that he really allowed me so much autonomy. Like, he just
Hmm.
let me be me. And
Hmm.
I had employers before and after him that were not that way at all,
Right.
and that really wanted me to fit into whatever it was they were doing. And I think the thought being, oh, well, this is a young dentist, so I can mold them. I even had some dentists that were hiring saying, well, we don't want anyone too far out of school because then we can't mold them.
Yeah.
So, and that's such an interesting perspective, right? Like, why do you not want someone that's maybe different from you? Why do you want someone that's exactly the same? Like,
Hmm.
so the best boss I ever had was somebody that just really allowed me to be so different, and
Yeah.
him and I were so different. But there's a fine line when you're learning between it's so hard to get a read on yourself, because you may know that you don't know a lot, but at the same time, that you know some things.
Yeah.
And so when someone is telling you consistently kind of what to be, who to be, how to do things, it's like within me, I know I felt this struggle of, okay, what is my like inner authority? Like, who is controlling me? Am I allowing someone else to control me? Or am I listening to my intuition? Or am I only listening to this person and shutting my own intuition down? And what in me is defensive versus like,
Hmm.
versus is this actually wrong, how I'm being treated?
Right.
Or am I asking for too much? Do I expect too much respect, or should I not get any respect at this point in my career? And there's all these like internal questions that go on. And I think that the people that I have seen really rise after associateships that were difficult were people that at some point in that situation found their inner voice and allowed their inner voice to come through. Because it's easy when you have somebody kind of constantly telling you who to be and how to be, to quiet that inner voice because you're sort of self-doubting.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, I'm curious as to how, I mean, in your situation, you had this kind of space and time when you left to kind of find your inner voice. But, um, you know, what might you say to somebody that is like in a situation right now that is in an associateship that feels like their sense of autonomy is being taken away and they don't have room to be creative or authentic in that practice, but they don't know if they should expect anything different?
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. I think that it's important to talk about this because everybody, like you said, you've talked to many people, and a lot of people go through the struggle in this position. And I've done a lot of self like doubting of the thoughts I had or my actions, and like, is this right or wrong? And you don't know, and you might not know. All I have to say is that whatever inner voice you have that's like trying to chime in at this time that you're going through this is, to me, always right in the end. It's like that initial voice. And even I would tell somebody that this, for me, when I started that associateship, started even before I was even in the office. I had those little feelings of different things. And I think people can relate to that. Like, even in the process of determining when you're starting, signing contracts, figuring out the whole thing, there are things that you learn about people when you have to make these kind of business decisions. And you know that from the get go. It's just you decide to quiet that down and be like, I don't really have anything else out there. Or, am I going to lose this job because I say something that I'm actually feeling? So I'm just going to quiet that down. And guess what? Whether it's a year from now, whether it's 2 years, whether it's 5 years, something will happen and you're going to be like, I had this feeling inside and I didn't listen to it. And I feel like a lot of people will say, oh yeah, like me too. And I think that the problem is that most people are scared, and so was I. And I think we're just scared of doing something about it and like saying something and maybe confronting the situation, because of course we're scared of the worst. And the worst is we're going to be out of a job, or we're going to have a conflict with that person. But there needs to be a way where you can do that, because if you can't, like, if you're not able to tap into your authentic self, or figure that, or have that space to figure that out in the practice, you're not going to be able to get there. And I also learned that everybody has a different way of running their practice and running and having an associate. Like you said, this one place that you worked, they let you be your authentic self and make your decisions, have autonomy, whatever it is. Not everybody's going to do that. Not every way is wrong or right. There's just going to be like 10 or 20 different ways that a senior doctor can have an associate, and you might fall into one of those situations and you have no control over that. It's just you get in there, and that's what you're and all of them can be very successful, highly regarded people in the community, have amazing practices, but do different things in their business and practice life. And it's just the chances of you getting into one of those. So my advice is to listen to your intuition from the beginning. And if you come to a head of something where you have to make a hard choice, it's okay to make that hard choice and go for it, and just eliminate that fear of okay, this is the only thing I have, because it's not true. You just have to get through this hard time, and if you have to do that, that's what you have to do.
I love that. I love how you brought in, even when we're interviewing or signing contracts or
Hmm.
considering, because yeah, I think the earlier we are in our career, the more likely we are to doubt that voice. And
Totally.
so for anybody that's listening, you do, like, I mean, the most important thing is to not doubt that voice.
Yeah,
Even if all of the facts say otherwise, our intuition will never let us down. So,
totally.
because the thing is that, our intuition picks up on like subtleties, on body language, on, little things that you might pick up on in the office that your
Hmm.
conscious mind may not realize, but your subconscious is picking up on it. So
Right.
So we don't always need the verbal or conscious justification for why we feel like we should do what we should do. But I love the point that if you don't listen to that voice, it will come back. Like, you will see later that that voice was right. I mean,
100%.
and sometimes it's good
Yeah.
for people to even go through that so that they learn
Yeah.
to trust that voice.
Yeah, exactly.
I also liked
Exactly.
what you said about how, when you have to make that hard decision, a lot of times the reason we make a decision that goes against our intuition is because we have this idea of there's nothing else, there's no other way. And one thing that I would really encourage people to do is to have a bigger imagination.
Yeah.
Like, just because you don't see another way right now doesn't mean that one does not exist. But if you consistently keep telling yourself that there is no other way, then there will be no other way because you won't be open to seeing one.
And the other thing I would say is that you cannot accept a new opportunity if you are putting yourself or keeping yourself in a bad opportunity. So if you take just the first step of making that next decision, then it's not like you know your path, but you know all these other options are going to open up as soon as you take that first step or that second step, and more things change as you go along. It's not like that final outcome is going to be apparent right away. It's just going to be like that initial step,
Right.
allowing that space to have that new thing or that new opportunity, and creating that path for yourself to go in, basically.
Yes, that's really important because I also hear people say, I mean, I'll even have clients that I coach say, well, I don't want to make that change until I know exactly how it's all going to play out. And the, just like you said, if you're putting all of your energy into your existing thing, there is not space for something else. So you have to
100%.
create space. Like, you have to do that, just take that first step.
Right.
It's not like, we're not saying like for people that are out there that are uncomfortable in their practice, oh, you should leave today and have no plan whatsoever. Like, we're not saying
100.
that.
Yeah. Exactly. No, exactly. Like make logical decisions in your best interest, but you know, just don't be scared. Don't be scared of the unknown, because I think everything that's scary ultimately ends up being the best thing that happens to you. And we talk about this all the time. So you just have to just embrace it, I think.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, what the process was like for you when you left that practice and you had this time, and it was like the rug got pulled out from under you and everything that you thought was going to be a certain way wasn't that way. What happened to you internally? What shifted then in your external life? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah. So when that happened, I mean, I was devastated. I think in any like transition period, or when something kind of goes down and you feel like the rug got, pulled from under you, you need some time before like you can fully logically process everything that's going on. You just need that like initial reactive kind of phase. You're going to be sad, upset, you're not going to know what to do. Like, I didn't have a job, I was like, how am I going to pay my rent? I was in a city for 6 months and I made a lot of friends, but like my family was not here, I was here on my own. So I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? and it's just like you need this initial kind of phase to process everything. So for me, that was hard. I mean, I just like called friends and family, and just tried to like share everything and cry and get all my emotions out, I think. And then you go through a period of, okay, like I need to buckle down, like what do I need to do? Luckily, as a dentist, you can get jobs. It's pretty, you can find jobs, you can find work. As a periodontist, I can go to other offices, and it took me a while, but I basically like took the steps to do that, to just have my income coming in again. um but it was very hard emotionally, and just like for my ego too. I think I was at that point, I wasn't as, like you say, grounded, I guess, as I am now. I was more of like, oh my God, if I'm not in this office, or if I'm not in this opportunity, it's more of like a, how do I say, like like a status or a label or something that I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough if I'm just working in these other offices. And, it's just like not what I envisioned. So I have to get over that. And then I think what really helped me, and I do this in anytime I have like a rough time in my life, I always start listening to podcasts or reading books or watching, clips of people that have gone through similar things and like how did they overcome these obstacles. And I just start like self-help, like self-improvement, self-help, like, how do you overcome from these situations? And that's what I basically did. So that was like a period of another, I would say, 6 months before I felt stable enough from that situation.
Yeah. What were some of those resources that you felt like really helped you?
So I listen to podcasts, like one of my favorites that I always listen to is Impact Theory with
Hmm.
Tom Bilyeu. So that it's not only dental. I mean, he doesn't really have any dental on there. It's
Yeah.
just more of like entrepreneurs or people that came from rock bottom and worked their way up, and how did they do it. And I like more the psychology of it. um just how do you change your mindset, shift your thinking, and make yourself stronger in that situation to be able to overcome those things. So I listen to those. I mean, when I'm in the car, when I'm, making breakfast in the morning, whatever it is, like I was constantly feeding my mind with those things. That was the only way that I knew how to cope with something like that. Yeah, so mostly podcasts.
So you said, you had that this is what you were constantly feeding your mind. And I think that's an important point to pause on, because I think that it's easy for us to think that we're not impacted by the people we're around, by other people's energy, by the sort of information we're feeding our brain. But we are impacted, even if our consciousness doesn't know it, it's affecting
Hmm.
us subconsciously. And so I know I've done the same thing in periods of my life. I mean, there were times where like I never missed a Tim Ferriss episode. And, um, like when I mean, it's to the point now where I will pick a podcast based on the mood that I want to be in.
Yeah.
So sometimes if I'm feeling like stuck in a kind of overthinking obsessive state, I'll turn on somebody like Joe Rogan, because he's just
Yeah.
so chill and open, and like within 5 minutes my entire feeling state has shifted. So I love this, that you were feeding your mind with things that you knew would help. How did you know they would help? Is it because it was shifting the way you felt?
Yes, it was shifting the way I felt, and it was giving me like hope, kind of.
Mhm.
Like I would listen to somebody and I'm like, wow, like they went from, they had nothing or they were on rock bottom, and like look at what they did with the resources they had. And I'm like, oh my God, and they just talk about all these things, and I was just like, it would give me like an energy, like it would give me just a positive energy, and yeah, it would change my feeling, it would change my mood. And I would say, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? If somebody had that experience and it was way worse than me, like I just lost a job, like I'm fine. I have, I'm okay. My health is good. Why can't I overcome that obstacle and get better, or have a situation that I never even thought was
Right.
possible happen?
Yeah, and this is a great tip for people that are stuck in this thinking of there's no other way,
Yeah.
because I feel like a lot of the reason people get stuck is because they can't see another way. And so, and I, it's interesting because listening to entrepreneurs, it has also been really beneficial for me, because a lot of that is really struggling, like, and to see how people overcome, and they overcome sort of through the obstacle rather than just by avoiding it. And then you get to see
Yeah.
their success and how much they evolved. So that's
And
a great.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes that what you go into, or like what your next step is something that you create on your own. Like I feel like if you do not have a vision, if you don't cultivate a vision as a result of that, and then work your way backwards, like kind of see where do you want to, once you kind of overcome the obstacle, where do you want to see yourself, and then have that vision, and you kind of create that opportunity for yourself. I think like nobody's going to give it to you, nobody's going to take you and put you in the next place. And I think you have to kind of realize that as well, that it's on you, you know?
Right. Yeah. You're kind of like your own savior, right?
You're kind of like your own,
Yeah.
yeah, nobody can save you from that.
Right.
From
Right.
yourself. Or
Yeah. That actually leads to another question that I had written down for you, which is what is your process for manifesting things into your life? And I mean, it sounds like, you're thinking of a vision and then you're kind of reverse engineering it,
yeah.
thinking of stepwise. What else do you do? Do you have like any steps, or how does that process kind of look?
So I think that I'm a big vision person, in a sense that even just like my horoscope sign, like I'm a future thinker or a vision thinker. Like I like to think of the future. So which can be good and bad, I guess. But for me, it's just I'm always thinking like, where do I see myself in 5, 10 years, 15 years, 20, whatever, every phase. How do I see my business or my professional life going? How do I see my personal life going? And I don't let myself like waver in that. Like that's what I envision for myself. And I know that like when I literally I before I had my office, I would visualize myself walking into my office. How am I seeing a patient? What employees do I have? How do I envision my office running? What kind of patients do I want to see? Like I like thought that, and I thought that almost every single day when I was working on my practice or thinking about how I would want it to be. That's what I do all the time. Like it's just, and it's not like something I have to sit down. I mean, like I meditate and do that too, but um it's just a constant thought through my mind. But I think also, doing things like yoga and physical things that kind of keep you, calm and grounded, and meditating. I mean, those all come into play with this as well. I don't write a lot of things down. Like occasionally I do, but I like to just think through the process in my head and just know like this is where I see myself going.
Yeah. So a few things that I just want to highlight for listeners is you said at the end that you just know it's where you're going. And I think that that is the difference, right? When we first of all just giving yourself permission to envision a bigger future, or where you want to be, or what you feel like would make you feel good, and
Hmm.
then operating in such a way that you know that that is going to happen.
Hmm.
So from the sort of research I've done and everything, I feel like there's kind of two different kinds of people. There's people that when it's correct, it's sort of correct for them when they want to create something in their life to get as specific as possible. Like they like to think it through, think about all the details, envision it, etc. And that is actually for them what helps it come into being, right? And then there's
Yeah.
people that it's a little bit more correct for them. And when I say correct, I just mean that it feels aligned, like it feels right.
Hmm.
That they almost are more of like well, I know how I want to feel, but I don't know all the specifics. So I'm just going to trust that it's all going to sort of come about. And the way that you know which one you are is sort of just what feels the most natural to you. So for you, it definitely sounds like getting as specific as possible and envisioning it is what kind of lights you up and makes you feel good, and it's also what helps it actually manifest into being. So I love that you take time to do it, that you allow yourself, like just even giving yourself permission to imagine it is something that I think
Hmm.
is so huge, because a lot of people I think will stop that. Like they'll have a dream but then they won't envision it, and I think that a lot of times comes down to self-worth. They feel
Yeah.
like they're not worth it. And I think for you, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but it sounds like when you left that practice and you kind of went through that emotion of, or that period of time where you processed your emotions, and then you went through another 6 months where you then listened to different stories and started getting inspired, that during that time you cultivated self-worth and you allowed yourself to dream bigger.
Yeah. And I think that anytime that I've been so through that process, a lot of times the reason why you might not envision yourself getting to like wherever you want to be, or your dream is too much, because people, whether it's people with a job that you have or people close to you, might tell you, mm, I don't know, I don't know if that's going to work. That's really risky. Like, why would you want to, invest all this money? You're in debt from school, and why would you want to open your practice? And, it's competitive. You're in a competitive, like I could literally list like pages of negative things that people said to me during that time. And that's part of the reason why some people, if they let that block them, they will not allow that vision to occur because people around them are telling them no. And for me, it's just always been kind of a motivating, factor that this wasn't the only time I had like negativity around me with what I wanted to do. I had that one time before in dental school, when I wanted to go into residency. It was, people would tell me like, oh, you weren't at the top 1% of your class or whatever it was, any negativity always for me fuels something more. So that's where I think people get stuck sometimes, is it blocks them
Yeah,
basically.
I have definitely noticed this about you. And it's actually I think that I tend to respond in the same way to sort of naysayers or people telling me I can't do something. And it's funny because my whole life, and maybe this has occurred with you too, but my whole life I've been underestimated.
Yeah.
And but in the last couple of years, I actually realized that that was partially because of the energy that I was projecting, like that I didn't fully believe in myself.
Yeah.
But interestingly, when then other people wouldn't believe in me, or when I would
Yeah.
be underestimated, I would oftentimes at first feel deflated for like, I don't know, that might last 5 minutes or it might last a couple days, but I would almost always rebound back with this sort of like energy of, oh, fuck you to tell me that I
Mhm.
can't do that.
Mhm.
Like I'm going to now do it just because fuck you. Like
Exactly.
so I would love to dig a little deeper into, do you feel like that's always been your sort of response to people that tell you can't do something? Or I mean, because this is a great tool for people to shift out of a defeated state.
I just think that I don't know if it was always like that for me. I just think that the my biggest fuel is somebody underestimating me or saying that you can't do that. I'm just like, why not? Like, if my dream is so big or like scary, and a lot of people would agree that the ones that have attained something grand, um, they would say that a lot of people, weren't supportive of them, or like would say no or whatever. It's too big. But yeah, that for me is like the biggest push for me is that. So every single time somebody says no, I'm like, watch me. Like, I'm gonna do that. There's nothing stopping me, and that's it. And then I just go for it.
So if that's your biggest motivator, do you think that you almost are attracting it to have
I
that
don't
extra
know.
push?
I don't know. I don't know. Like, I think that in a way, I stand my ground for what I want to do. And naturally, if you do that,
Yeah.
people might push back, right? So maybe that just happens because I am standing to what I believe should
Well, I
happen.
think that certain people will push back.
Certain people,
Like
yeah.
the best, um, one of the best mentors I've had in dentistry has been David Goucher, and the awesome thing about him, and then also mentors that I've had outside of dentistry, is that they've allowed me to disagree and allowed me to
Mhm.
dream big and
Mhm.
encouraged it. And but I would say the majority of people in my life were not that way. And but now looking back, I kind of wonder if I was, I mean, we ultimately choose who we spend our time around. And I am
Yeah.
wondering if part of my journey has been that I was underestimating myself to a certain degree. And so I was surrounding myself with people that were also kind of, in a way, underestimating me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
No.
now, like, I am super conscious, and this is something else I also wrote down that I wanted to talk to you about. Now I'm really conscious about who I'm spending my time with. Like,
Hmm.
1,000 more percent than ever before, where I am just really like, okay, who, when I am around this person, what is my energy doing? How am I feeling? Like, am I exhausted after I spend time with this person, or do I feel
Hmm.
really lit up and like excited? Like,
Yeah.
I remember the last time you and I chatted on the phone. When I got a phone, I felt like really energized,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So
I
tell me
agree with
about that.
you. So I think that I also over time have learned how to analyze interactions that I have between people, friends, family, colleagues, anybody, and see how do I feel in response to that. And I agree with you. Like, if you have negativity, if you have that person where you every time you get off the phone with them or anytime you see them, you're just like they drain energy from you. I've had to cut people out of my life, not necessarily cut them out, but distance myself from them in a way that and I feel so much free, so free and relieved. And just learning to say no if you don't want to participate in something that you feel is going to take energy from you, you just have to say no. And I've learned that too, that just putting boundaries, saying no, not being around negative people, it's so valuable for growth and to protect your energy and your space so that you can, do the things that you need to do and just stay focused on that.
What would you say to somebody that says, yeah, these sort of people drain me, but I should do this. I should go to lunch with them. I should go to coffee. So I have to.
I mean, if you know that they're draining you and you feel that all the time and you're still allowing yourself to do that, I mean, you just have to know that that's how you're going to feel, and ultimately over time it's going to add up, and then at some point you're just, I don't know. I I just think that it's not a good idea if you're trying to protect your energy and stay in the positive mindset to do that. I think that you can still have relationships with them and just maybe, just kind of distance yourself. Like maybe if you were they're seeing you all the time or they want to hang out with you all the time and you're like, look, just like in a nice way, say that you can't or whatever it is. But
Right.
I don't know. What do you do stuff?
I mean, one thing that I look for now is if, am I using the word should? Like, so because it's funny, I think that our shoulds are really clever and our subconscious is really
Mm,
clever. And when we
mm,
feel like we have to do something, we will start to, like, I'll almost be like, well, I'll start to draw out what I think might be positive about seeing someone, even though I know, my intuition is sort of saying, like, you don't want to actually do this. My mind will start thinking of reasons why it would be beneficial for me to do it. And then I'll feel a weird tension. And so, first of
yeah.
all, one of my big flags is like, am I feeling tension about this? Like, is it a hell yes? Or is
Right.
it a I don't know? Because for me, if it's an
Right.
I don't know and I'm feeling tension, that generally means it's actually a no, but for some reason I'm having trouble saying no. Right.
Yeah. 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 Totally.
Um, and then the another thing I'll use is just in my mind if I catch myself saying should, like it,
Yeah.
and because that's all from, from old beliefs, from beliefs that I have to be a certain way in order to be liked, accepted, loved, successful, etc.
Yeah.
So, and then I think that, learning to say no for me was, it took me a while to some degree with the harder things. Like, there's certain things that are really
Hmm.
easy for people to say no to, but then there's things where you just feel this weird sense of heavy obligation, and it's hard to say no because it's like just energetically difficult. And so,
Yeah.
one of the things that really helped me with that was realizing that if it's something that really isn't great for me and it's draining me, that it's not good for that person either, because then I'm not my best self with that
Yeah,
person.
totally.
And the other interesting thing is that people are way more understanding in real life than I think they're going to be sometimes in my mind.
Yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
if we just come at it with honesty and just say like, I'm just not feeling like it's something I can do right now, or, you know, I mean, and not to say that we have to be really even specific, but just being like, yeah, I can't do it.
Well, I think sometimes it sucks, but you have to be honest
Yeah.
sometimes with the person and say, I've had this type of situation where I had to tell someone, look, every time I'm with you, I feel like you're draining energy from me. I don't feel a positive energy, and I feel like I'm giving something and you're taking energy from me. And I just said it like that. And that might be harsh. I don't know. It's just the honest truth. And so you just need to say to that person, hey, like, I need some positivity in my life. I want somebody with energy that I can, that when I leave that interaction, you and I both gain something from each other and we feel fulfilled in that relationship versus not being fulfilled and feeling empty or feeling drained, and just being open and honest with them and
Yes.
learning to say no. Like also I've learned the hard way too, and now it's liberating to say no. You're just like, oh my god, like I can actually say no. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Like,
Yes. I mean, seriously, I learning to say no, and it is, I totally agree. It's one of the most liberating things of my life, of just being like,
that.
oh my God, I don't have to deal with this. I can
Yeah.
just say no. And it's crazy what kind of
Yeah,
energy that frees up for you to enjoy life and put into other projects and other connections. And yeah,
absolutely.
I really like what you said about, the way that I phrase it is it has to be kind of an even exchange. So
Hmm.
with any relationship now that I have in my life, if I'm hopping on the phone with someone and it ends up being me just almost like coaching someone for like 2 hours, like that's no longer like a friendship to me. I mean,
Exactly.
of course, every now and then that's fine. Like but I'm saying like over
Absolutely.
6 to 12 months, if every time I get on the phone with someone, I'm just coaching, like at that point, it's like, this is not an equal exchange.
Well, I've also found that the more that you work on yourself, the more that you're in a happy place with yourself, the more that you exude positive energy with yourself, the more those people that can't get them for themselves will seek that in you. And they might call you as a friend and say, hey, Steph, I need to talk to you about X, Y, Z. You sit there and then maybe you give them some advice or you say something from your perspective, which is more of a positive one or whatever, and then they don't change or they don't do something in their life to that you're giving them advice and they don't listen to that or whatever, then it's like you're back to the same thing over and over. That's the problem, because usually I find that it's the people that struggle within themselves to find that place where they're happy and positive and fulfilled. They're just seeking to get that out of you. those are
Yes. Yeah.
those are my experiences, at least.
Right. It's like the drip feed, right? Like they just want
Yeah.
their hit or whatever. I mean, not to make it sound like,
No, yeah, but
but that is, yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. And the other thing I've noticed since I've done more personal work, um, and I mean, this has kind of happened to me to a certain degree my whole life, but it's like, I have made peace with the fact that there is people in our lives that are there for just a season. And sometimes we shift into a different place where, we feel like we have evolved, and maybe the people that we are connected to have evolved
mhm,
in a different way, or maybe they're not evolving. And but
right.
for whatever reason, we are no longer really like aligned with them. And so there's so many people that I know that will really cling to those relationships, but I will see it drain them, because
Yeah,
there's now not a true connection, or that other person isn't allowing space or holding space for you to change.
yeah,
And it's like, there has to be some sort of, you have to give yourself permission to let go of relationships that are no longer serving you. So I wonder
Hmm.
what your experience has been with that.
Relationships in which sense?
In any relationship, like friendships, partnerships, intimate relationships, like when you know that, yeah, I feel like to some degree I've evolved into a different space, and this person, like we are just, you know, I mean, to be totally honest, for me, what happens a lot of times is that I will do an insane amount of internal work, which is really what I've been doing. Like, I feel like I've been doing internal work as a full-time job for the last 3 years, and I've done
Yeah,
it
yeah.
my whole life. And so what sometimes will happen is that I will have a big connection with someone, but then we shift into a place where, just like you said, where now I feel like when they're calling me, it's more of just like a taking, and I'm not no longer receiving anything.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that I don't like really love that person or respect them or
Yeah.
admire them, or but it's just no longer a fulfilling relationship for me. And so I oftentimes will do exactly what you're saying, which is kind of create some space or distance. And the reason I create distance is because then I can create space for new relationships that are fulfilling for me to enter in. But I feel like a lot of times people don't give themselves permission to do that. And they continue to try and make relationships work and make them fit. And it ends up slowing their own personal growth and also just not being healthy for either party.
So I think this is a good point. This ties into so many different things. This ties into friendships. This ties into relationships. This ties into business, associateships. So I think that once you realize that you don't have to be in this relationship or it's not serving you, that you can choose in whatever way you decide to do to do something about it. So I think that, for example, like why would you stay in a relationship with a guy or a girl or whatever, and if it's not what you're looking for, it's not fulfilling to you, or you're not happy or whatever, why would you stay in that, right? It makes no sense. You would decide, hey, this is not working for me. I mean, you might for a while and you might not know how to handle this, but you wouldn't, right? And then why you can do the same thing with friendships. I mean, even if it's a family member, like I've had issues with a family member that I've had to distance myself. Just because they're a family member of mine does not mean that I automatically, our relationship doesn't require work or doesn't require a reciprocal thing from both parties. It's just like any relationship between two people require some sort of give and take, but it has to be equal and it has to be fulfilling to both parties. And this is with anything. So I think that you have to somehow overcome that you need this person or you need this situation, or this, there's nothing else, or you won't have another friend like this, or you've been a friend with this person since you were in kindergarten but you guys are completely different people. Like that's okay. And like you said, you can have seasons and things, but this applies to so many different relationships, and I think that, and sometimes you might be good at one way handling like a friend, but you might not be good at relationships. Like, that probably was me for a while, because I was like in relationships that I knew weren't, again, right. And it's that goes back to that gut feeling or your intuition of the same thing. And I struggled with that for a while, but then I got to the point like, no, if I, like, you need to have set expectations and boundaries and go through with that no matter what relationship that you're in.
Right.
you know
Yeah, the I think that you're right, that there's an element of worrying that something else isn't going to come into play. Like there's a scarcity
yeah,
element to it,
yeah,
right? There's
yeah,
almost like, well, what if something better doesn't come? And then there is this weird obligation from who you're supposed to be and what
hmm
relationships are supposed to look like these pictures we have in our heads of. I like that you brought up with a family member, because just because someone's a family member, if they are, I mean, I actually think that that's more so important. Like if you have a family member, because family members tend to get into your most sort of vulnerable, intimate spaces, right? And so it's like,
yeah,
I mean, I am mostly I'm so much more easily triggered by a family member than I am
Right.
a friend, because they know me much more intimately. And that's why it's even more important to have boundaries. But in order to have boundaries, you have to have a sense of yourself, a sense of your sort of own identity. You have to
Yeah.
have a belief and a trust that you know everything will end up being okay, that you can take care of yourself. You have to have like a personal sense of power.
Yeah.
And I think it really comes to also down to self-worth. Like you have to value
100%.
yourself enough to say, this isn't serving me.
Absolutely. 100%. And that takes time. It takes time to, if you've gone through trauma or you've had a rough time with, anything in your life, when you were younger, these all come into play and you have to kind of work through that. And a lot of people don't want to address why they maybe don't have that self-worth or what it is stemming, like, I went to therapy after my past relationship, or at the end of my past relationship after that, that I learned a lot of stuff about my childhood, that like why I was doing something in my relationship based on my past with my family. And it's just like then understanding, oh, okay, this is why do I do that? Okay, it makes sense. How can I grow from that? How can I change? How can I be aware that I do that? And yeah, having self-worth, because that's huge. Like that's so important. And because people want someone else to fulfill that for them, and then that's not going to happen. And
Oh
just
yeah.
knowing, like, that was a huge turning point for me, where I was like, nobody, not a boyfriend, not a friend, not a family, not a job is going to do that for me. Like I have to make my own happiness for myself. I have to be value myself and the people around me and the situations I'm in, and make that for myself. So
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I have to say that getting to know myself and valuing myself was probably one of the hardest things for me. I mean, looking back at past, especially intimate relationships, but also, with mentors or partnerships or friends,
yes.
I was looking to other people to tell me that I was valuable. Because I think I had a fundamental lack of self-worth, I was also then trying to overachieve to like prove to the world, ultimately to myself, that I was valuable.
Yeah.
And I wanted people to reflect that back to me. I mean, it was like I was trying to fill that void within myself through others by saying, tell me I'm
Yeah.
valuable. And I
Yeah.
remember, in past relationships, I would look to my partner to tell me I was valuable, and I would be really hard on them if they weren't what I thought to be supporting me enough. But really it was that I didn't see myself.
100%.
And like,
Yes.
no, you are never going to feel valuable through other people.
100%. I went through the same exact thing. The same exact thing. Yeah. It's tough. It's a tough like realization. It takes work to get there.
Yeah. It yeah,
So
yeah, and like, I mean, looking back for me, like, one way you can understand your sort of conditioning, or maybe even what you grew up with, is by looking at your
mhm.
current patterns. And so
Mhm.
it was a real pattern for me to feel like people were letting me down, that and I would this is another interesting thing, is like I would give and give and give and give and give of my own energy, and to try and help
Yes.
people and
Yeah.
advise people, because ultimately what I wanted back was to feel valuable. But no matter what anyone did to tell me my worth or value, it was never enough.
Yeah. Always. I was exactly in the same place. And I would constantly seek that from someone else, or in a relationship or whoever, family. And yeah, it will never be enough. It will never be enough until you make that for yourself. So that's a huge lesson for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is such, for anyone that's listening, it is so liberating when you realize that you actually can fulfill that void within yourself, and that you can do it, and that you are truly the only person that can do it. I think that before you realize that you can do it, it almost feels sort of devastating to think, oh my God, no one's going to feel this. Like, how am I ever going to feel good? But then
Yeah.
when you realize that you can do it for yourself and you start to, it's like
Yeah.
the most fulfilling process.
I think you have to go through a period of time though that you're only dependent on yourself, that you only have yourself there and you're alone and you're lonely, or you have a long period of time where you're on your own. That's the only time you can learn to grow in that space. Again, if you're in the wrong relationship, if you're in the wrong job, if you're in a situation that you don't have that space to grow and to learn, you will not be able to find that. You
Yeah.
see? So for me, it was like same thing. It was just being alone for a long period of time and being okay with that, coming to terms like I'm okay with this. Like I don't need anybody. I don't need anybody to value myself. I can make that for myself. So um that was a growth for me, and that helped me tremendously.
Yes, and I hear that. I mean, I think that's probably the most common way
Yeah.
of realizing this for yourself is kind of being alone, and then instead of rushing into a relationship or in a situation that is not truly serving you, just taking pause and saying.
Yeah.
But I also want to say that for me, that process has actually been done with a partner. But the interesting thing is that it was fully an inside job, so it's the same
Yeah.
thing as being alone, because what I realized was that I it's almost like I made this conscious decision of, okay, what would happen if I didn't rely on my partner for any of these things?
Yeah.
Like, what if I only relied on myself? And what if when I'm triggered by my partner, instead of blaming my partner in that moment,
Right.
I immediately said, well, what is this saying about me that I'm triggered? And what is it saying about my past? And what does it say about my patterns?
Yes. Yes.
And so in that way, actually being with a partner was a great advantage, because it was like a mirror, because I was triggered all the time. And so every time I was triggered, I was like, okay, what is this saying about me? But I will say that I think that it was really hard, like, to do
Yeah.
that with a
Yeah.
partner. And
Yeah.
because you have to be really conscious of taking a lot of personal space, and
Yeah.
you have to be you have to own it. Like, you have to own
Mhm.
that you're going through a journey. And I would say
Mhm.
for anyone listening, because this applies to people that are married with kids, or in locked into sort of a business relationship, and it's something that you don't want to leave, you can still do this while you're connected to people, but you have to really commit to it and own it and go
Yeah. Yeah.
and probably tell that person, okay, I'm going to work really hard here to understand what is mine and what is my shit, and what I'm projecting versus what I'm projecting onto you.
Yeah, totally.
Um, and I think a therapist, for me, I've done this whole, like, all this work with a therapist. I think a therapist, a coach is like 100% necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
can't, because you need an unbiased observer,
Mhm. Mhm. Totally.
and a friend or a family member is not an unbiased observer.
No, exactly. No. They're too biased in one way, and then it's just yeah, it doesn't help. It
Yeah.
doesn't help.
Yeah. How can you tell when something is not for you? Like, when something is not serving you?
I usually can tell because I'm unhappy, it like more than I'm happy. So there are things that it might not be all the time or every day, but for the most part, if I look at that situation as a whole, it gives me either more anxiety, or I'm constantly thinking about why is this, or I'm like coming to people and asking them for advice on something because I'm not sure myself. I know that it's just something is not right for me. But for the most part, I'm either unhappy and I'm just not myself, you
Right.
know?
The thing I want to draw attention to for our listeners is that you're using this really good tool of thinking about your thinking,
Hmm.
because we will naturally go into tailspins of thought that's uncontrollable at times, right? Like all this, but
Yeah.
then you're noticing that you're thinking.
Yes.
And then you're saying, wait, what's behind this? Like, what's behind this inner dialogue and this constant obsessive thinking? So instead of trying to fix the situation through the obsessive thinking, you're saying, what is the obsessive, like what's underneath it?
Right. 100%. Yes. And I mean, that could be with anything, but being aware of your thoughts about something and how often you think about it and how you feel when those thoughts come into your mind is important, to distinguish those situations.
How did you learn how to do that? If you can remember.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know, but all I know is like if I'm feeling like unsure, uneasy. Well, I think I learned that because when I compare it to situations that are easy, that are effortless, that make me happy, I'm like, I know what that feels like, right? We know that if we have a situation, let's say a job, for example, and we're just like every day we come into work and we're happy and like nothing triggers us. But like when I used to think about the wrong job on Sunday before going to work, I would be like in anxiety. I would say like, what's wrong? Like, why do I not want to go to work? Because that I know there's something wrong there. Something is not right, not serving me. It's not the right fit for me. Just like comparing those situations basically.
Yeah.
Helped me.
Do you find that your meditation and yoga practice has helped you with noticing?
Oh, totally. It helps me notice my thoughts, what it is I think when I think it. And I just feel like it allows you to just take the emotion out of it and kind of just logically think, okay, what is going on? How am I reacting to it? And like acknowledging those reactions, but just being present in your mind. Because how many people who maybe have never tried meditation, have never tried yoga, they think in this like high anxiety or high state where their thoughts are racing through their mind all the time every day, and they don't know how to pause and just take a step back and evaluate those situations. So it does do something for you when you can just like take a step back, like listen to your breath, whatever it is you're doing, or be in a quiet room or whatever it is that helps you kind of just process those feelings and those thoughts. So it's definitely helped me for sure.
Yeah. I wrote this question down for you, and I'm curious what you think about this. When you think of the words abundance and prosperity, what do these words mean to you, and how has your life changed in regards to these things since you have been, I guess, more conscious about the way you're living and the choices that you're making?
So yeah, abundance and prosperity, I think, are great words, and they're something. When I think of those in my mind, it's something that you create for yourself basically. So um you can wake up in the morning and have start your day as within an abundance mindset, because you take the time to say, I have all of these things in my life. I have a home, I have a car I love to drive, I have my work, I have my friends, I have, wherever you live, whatever it is, I have the woods, I have the ocean, I have the mountains, I have, what is it that you have? And like these are the things that you just say to yourself, like, I have all of these things in my life. My life is abundant. I'm living in a life of abundance when you're just looking at all the things that you have. And prosperity also, it's just something that you define for yourself. Like, what is it that, you look at as a future that I'm going to prosper in this moment. I have this situation happening and this is my prosperity in my mind. So you have to kind of just look around you and kind of just see like what is it in your life that matters to you, that you value. And then the second part you asked me
Yeah,
was,
I mean, Well, there's a reason you do this practice, right? And I mean,
Hmm.
one of the reasons is because it makes you feel good.
Yeah. Um, I do it because I need to, it's a practice, just like anything, right? So your mind, you have to mold your mind to whatever it is that you want to to create in your world. So just like going to the gym or doing yoga or whatever it is that we do, we have to practice it. So obviously you need to do it every day. Just if you take one day and do a meditation and listen or do something, that doesn't mean that your life is going to change from that one moment. You have to consciously put the time and effort into doing that and be around people that kind of give you that same energy. It's just a constant practice. That's what I have to say about that, is that when I realized that I have to train my mind to think that way and put the time in every day, then that's when that shifted for me, that this is something I have to constantly do, throughout my life.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when the idea here being, for my listeners, that when we desire something, so everybody desires like more abundance and prosperity, and everybody kind of wants to feel good, right?
Hmm.
The way that we are going to feel more of these things is not by focusing on what we're lacking.
Yeah.
So if we are constantly focused on what we don't have and what's wrong,
Right.
then that is where our subconscious is going to pick up information on. So if we're like, nothing
Hmm.
ever works, then our subconscious is now going to pick up information to sort of prove that claim.
Yes.
Versus if we wake up and have like, a gratitude or an abundance mindset practice where we just soak in the things that we're grateful for and the things that we have,
Yeah.
it then will train our brain to shift our focus in a different direction. And then what that does is it alerts the subconscious to, I mean, what you're really doing is you're telling the subconscious, I want you to show me all the things that I have. I want you to show me
Yeah.
all the things that make me feel good. And I want you to help me see opportunities for more of that.
Yeah. Totally. Spot on. Yeah. I
And you're
love that.
so right that it's a practice. I mean, it's just like going to the gym. I mean, when I first started a gratitude practice, I remember I had the 5-minute journal, and I would just write down some things I was grateful for in the morning and in the evening. And for the first several weeks, it was hard. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, it didn't feel natural, but just because something doesn't feel natural doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Because, what I did notice over time was, oh my gosh, now throughout the day, I'm starting to notice things I'm grateful for. And I'm starting to notice things that, oh, I'm going to put this in my gratitude journal tonight. And then you start to notice that, oh, I actually feel good when I'm focusing on things I'm grateful for. And
Yeah.
yeah, so have you noticed a shift in your external life since you have taken, like, things actually changing in your world, in your life, since you have really been more diligent about kind of cultivating an abundance and like a gratitude mindset?
Yes. Definitely. I feel like I can take when I get myself into stressful situations or situations that, I didn't expect, I can very quickly shift my thoughts and my mindset because of this daily practice. So something happens in your day and it's just like a switch. You can just switch right away. Somebody pisses you off, whatever. And instead of being reactive, you just know, okay, let's take a look at what do I have? Like, what am I grateful for? Should I really be reactive to this person or in this situation? And you just stay calm. And then people around you are calm too, because they're not going to feed up on your energy versus somebody that's constantly reactive every day, right? You're going to just, people around you, whether it's your staff, your employees, your family, your significant other, is constantly going to be, on edge too. So it just allows you to deal with the ups and downs of life in just a more calm and like grounded way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When how do you make sure that you create space for yourself? Do you have a routine to do these sorts of things? What are your days look like? That, I mean, and it might look different with quarantine and everything, but how do you make
Yeah.
sure that you are doing these things
Doing
that,
this.
yeah,
So that's a great question. I think one of the biggest things for me now, well, because I'm in a relationship now and Stephen and I are together 24/7 basically at home, and everything we do is together now. We actually both are very into this. So it really helps to have a partner or somebody that you're with. If you don't have the space, if you're just with someone, we do this together in a sense. Like we'll do like a meditation together, or we'll do yoga together, or we just talk about it. Like say, like I'm grateful about this or whatever it is. Like that works for me because we're together all the time. But if you're, if you're not with your significant other, or maybe they don't practice it like you do, you could just take the time, for yourself, like in the morning or at the end of the day, just like take some time to do it. And again, listen to things that cultivate that thinking for you. But I think for me, my routine has been like with him, just doing the things that we do and kind of incorporating that into our day, because we both share the same kind of philosophy and thoughts on that, which is very helpful.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
When you notice that when you suddenly notice that maybe you're not so grounded, what do you kind of use as a tool to get back into a centered state?
So for me, it's breathing. Like I will do like my yoga breathing exercise where I just take like 5 deep breaths, really slow inhales, pause, like slow exhales. 'Cause I know like when I can't sleep at night and my mind is moving, I'll do those like yoga breathing and I'll fall asleep. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like I know when to do it because I know my mind is racing. So I do that. I use that as a tool. Like if I have a situation that comes up, I'll just like sit there for like a minute and just do the breathing. For me, that really helps because it like automatically lowers your blood pressure and just,
Mm-hmm.
your heart rate, and just kind of like, so that is like my biggest tool. And sometimes it's like you're in the situation, you worked up, and that's okay. You can feel it for a moment, just embrace it. And then maybe later on do something where it could be like an exercise or going out for a walk, or that helps too. But if I can say the biggest thing that helped me was this like instantaneous thing that I can do anywhere, which is breathing. You don't need anything. That will allow you to shift right away
Yeah. It's
in
so
that.
funny how it can make such a big difference, but how so
Yeah.
many people, it's almost just like just noticing your breathing. Just because a lot of times when we're stressed, our breathing
Hmm.
becomes all in our chest. It's really short,
Yes.
shallow breaths. And if you can just deepen your breath, taking a 5 to 6 second inhale, holding it, and then 5 to 6 second exhalation, that immediately will switch on your parasympathetic.
Yeah.
So for anybody that's listening,
Really good.
amazing tool. And I think that it's often not used because it's almost like too easy.
Yeah, totally. It's like you can do it anywhere. I mean, it's so valuable.
Yeah.
It's so valuable. But I think for me, it was like through yoga taught me about breathing, the importance of it. Before I would have been like, breathing, what is that going to do for you?
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Okay. So I have one last question for you.
yeah.
So you mentioned impact theory. What other books, podcasts, and I'm not talking dental related, but just books, podcasts, maybe even films, shows, anything that you feel like over the last several years has been important to you or has helped give you different perspectives?
Yeah. So I have some. Let me see. I'm trying to think of the names off the top of my head. Um, so the other podcast, what is the other podcast that I listen to? Let me tell you. The other one that helped me, well, Tom Bilyeu, The Impact Theory. Oh, The School of Greatness with Lewis
Lewis
Howes. I
House,
would listen,
yeah.
yeah, I listened to that one first because I think he was kind of the first one that started all this stuff. And I love all those. And then the books that I had that I really like. So there was one book that I read. Let me see. Um, so there's one that I like. It's called Super Attractor by Gabrielle
Hmm.
Bernstein. I don't know if you read that
I
one.
have, yeah.
The other one is that Stephen and I like recently listened to that he showed me is The Gifts of Imperfection, which
Uh-huh.
I like that one a lot. Oh, Brian Tracy, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life.
Hmm.
And then another Brian Tracy book, The Power of Self-Discipline, No Excuses. So those two I listened to a lot, like during that healing time after leaving that office. So just like kind of getting that discipline down and changing your thoughts and all of that. And then the one that I'm currently reading right now is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And it talks about leadership, which is like, and it talks about more about like workplace and stuff like that, which I love that because that's like my newest like self-help journey, I think, is leadership. Obviously now with my office, that there's so many things about that I have, that people study that you just don't realize, which I think that's like such a great topic.
For sure.
So yeah, those are mine.
That's an awesome list. Yeah, those are all so great. Awesome. So how can people connect with you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Dr. Eugenia. And I also have a practice page that's Poco Pets Perio. So both of those are linked on my main page. And then, yeah, I'm on Instagram and I have a website. But yeah, Instagram is probably the best way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you
Thanks,
so
Steph.
much.
Yeah,
I
you're
think this is going to
welcome.
be a really enlightening conversation for people.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for taking the time.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay.